I'm an architect. I actually studied abroad and then I came back to Singapore and worked for almost close to 8 years now.
I'm Guo Jie, I'm a photographer, so I've been working in the industry for 14 years. And then we started working together and then we formed a collective that is open to all sorts of creative work. When we started working together, we come from different practice because I come from photography and she comes from actual practicing in architecture and spatial design. But we slowly observed that there's a common ground that we like to use and observe anything around us in the common spaces, be it like, the curb, the everyday environment, and then use that and become an open dialogue to how we design.
I think the other thing is that we are, as individuals and also as a collective studio, right, we are very intrigued or very drawn to like the everyday. So I think in terms of that, as what he just shared, I think usually in most of our design, we try to
be more sensitive.
Yeah.
We're more sensitive to the everyday. Really like, for example, the windows are lower, right? Because the owner has a dog and we want to have more viewing holes for his dog. Really simple fundamental things. We are not really here to try and find something new. Like there's no grand scheme of things. We really just want to bring out very simple dialogue, simple everyday things. Could really be, even the carpenter inspired us for the lamp here. Just a random discussion and then we just took that and then we kind of like work with it. And I think that kind of design intent is a bit more straightforward, a bit more pure, and kind of find joy in looking at that.
So I think for every project that we work on, right, I think it's very fundamental, but I think it's also something that we constantly remind ourselves that we need to have a very clear intention of why this design, like what is the concept and how we develop it. Because when we keep designing, sometimes we get lost. And with this being very clear, it will keep us consistent in the midst of everything. And I guess it's also back to like the everyday, right? The simplicity of things. And then with that, it also draws us back to the intention of why we do what we do. So everything kind of like correlates in that sense because everything is related in the most subtle or in the most obvious way you can possibly think about. Yeah. I think being abroad for quite a long period of my life, coming back was something that is a new change. But I think it's also like in every place that you stay, you kind of adapt. And I think it's something that as long as we are very clear, this adaptation is, it's very subjective, but then I feel like the adaptation is very easy, I guess. I think for me, that was something that in terms of living abroad and coming back. But I think in terms of working here over the years, one of the things is definitely, I think the reality of life and then how it also make us kind of like think how we shape design of today. Fundamentally, everything is the same. But then what is different from then and now, even like being away and coming back to Singapore, we see the same thing, but it's also being used or adapted or thought about in a very different manner. For me, that is the difference.
Living in HDB, we have a utilitarian format of living. Living room has the largest window, toilet has the smallest window. That affects how you think about things. We always talk about being efficient as a Singaporean, I actually think that yes, that may be a major constraint, but designing with that kind of constraint and working around with that component, but still making something beautiful, right, is fascinating. Because we always say we are restricted by we can't do this, we can't do that. But if you skirt around that constraint, right, I think something fun will arise. We don't always have to look at something being practical means it's not beautiful. Super practical stuff can be super sexy, I personally believe so. Mean it when you say local support, because a lot of times when we talk about local support, right, don't actually mean it. And the recent event.
I don't think really it's about resources in the most direct way, but I guess it's more on educating in giving space, healthy space, whether creative or not, to then let people feel that they can do what they want. I guess it's not something about having a physical space also, because physical space, if you have the intent, you can always find that. But it's more on the mentor and safe space for people to do whatever not say whatever, but something for them to.
Whatever's morally accepted.
Yeah. Okay, I think for Singapore Design Week, right, we are mostly involved in the Pavilion together with Studio Grain, and then we have Humid House as well and Insert Coin. Our job, which I think is very similar to what we often do as well, is that we try to collaborate, whether it's with artists or craft, even as simple as like craftsmen from our carpentry. We try to understand them and put them together as a team. So I think in this pavilion, it is a very clear, or maybe it is something that is very similar to what we usually do as a studio, as a practice. Working with them, we have a lot of direct, as with the title, open dialogue. I think we really have a lot of dialogue with all of them to understand what they need. It's not like this is your space, you do your thing. It's a dialogue between the process, which then will show in the product, and then the dialogue will then translate into the people experiencing it. So it's not a one way, but it's a constant exchange. It's one of the largest scale projects we have done so far. So there's also something exciting. I think something different from us to explore, like really zooming in and zooming out.
I think just to add on to the idea of fabricated, like dialogue with our fabricators, right? There's a lot of things that we are not quite sure could be done or could not be done, and then we have to talk to the engineer and talk about how much can we cantilever, how much do the weight needs to be. These functional choices to create what we want becomes very important detail to how the space can feel. By detailing all these like minute surfaces, right, I think that adds so much more wonderful kind of like texture, sensory experience to how you can be in the space, I think my advice would be go and live your life, If you live your life, then you know how to actually feedback and back to like what I was saying, I was a photographer, right? If as a photographer, you just hold your camera and you just face the world with your camera. You can't take a good picture. You have to know what is going around in the world. You need to read. You need to be interested in a lot of things. Then there's opinion, right, in how you make an image. Otherwise, your camera is just like randomly capturing.
But I guess it's just like there's no correct or wrong answer sometimes, and the process of finding it, right, it really differ. I mean, it's as cliche as it sounds, but then it's just sometimes the answers are actually as direct as being in front of you. Don't really need to be like eager to go and find it.